We have friends here in the church that loan us their cottage. And one summer we were there, and I wear contact lenses. And we had come up the stairs from the beach onto the lawn. And there was something in my eye, so I just kind of rubbed it. And then I walked over to the deck. And as I was walking up the deck steps, I realized I'm seeing a little fuzzy out of one eye. So I had lost my contact somewhere between the top of the stairs and the deck. So I walked back and forth trying to find that contact lens. And it was getting to be a little later in the day, so I thought, I'm just going to give up. And, have you ever felt like that? This big search for something, it's out there somewhere. Maybe you're not even sure what you're looking for. You're not sure where to find it. And at some point, you begin to think, I'm never going to find it. And I'm sure we experience that at some point. You lose something valuable, and you start searching for it, and you look, and you just never seem to be able to find it. So in some ways, that's not a bad definition of life, because it's this search for something. It's this search for something of value. It's a search for something of meaning. Now, over the next few weeks, we are going to be studying the book of Ecclesiastes. And Solomon is going to talk about this search that he is on, trying to find meaning and purpose in his life. And his search takes him down a number of different paths, and some of the same paths that we actually follow today. And he lets us in on the fact that each of these paths just seemed to be a dead end. They never led him to what he was looking for. He acquired a lot, and he was extremely successful. He writes as someone who's seen it all, heard it all, had every kind of entertainment and pleasure made available to him. But then he said, this isn't it. And you need to keep searching. And that can be hard to hear, because many of us have the direction of our lives determined by what our culture says. We're so influenced by our culture. And Solomon follows each of those paths, and he says, this isn't it. And it's hard if you've committed your life to something, and now someone's telling you that, this isn't the right path. If you're an entrepreneur and your business is growing, or maybe you're vice president of a company and you're next in line to become the president, or maybe you're an investment banker and your portfolio is really expanding, or maybe it's a college student that just added the letters PhD to your name, or maybe it's a husband who's working 60 hours a week just trying to get ahead. Or maybe it's the person who goes out on the weekend and parties and drinks and is living for some pleasure. Then this might be hard for you to hear, because Solomon is going to say to us, I've been there, I've done that, and keep searching. This isn't it. So in chapter 1, he describes what that life feels like when you haven't found what you're looking for. And the first point that he makes is life is meaningless. And it just feels meaningless. And in verse 2 of chapter 1, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. And that's how he's going to refer to himself in the book. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So I think I kind of know what he's trying to say here. He's saying it's meaningless. He just kind of comes right out and says it. Journal entry number 1 is... It's not full of hope. It's not full of optimism. It's just him saying, I have found this conclusion to be meaningless. I've done it all. I've heard it all. And one word describes it. It's meaningless. Now, has anyone ever used the expression whatever to you? My wife even used, she didn't say it. It was her body language this week. She was lying on the sofa, and I asked her something. And it was just the hand flew like that. It was a whatever type of hand. And whatever's actually, that's not a bad paraphrase for meaningless. Like whatever. So how much has really changed between then and now? Solomon feels that life is meaningless when you haven't found what you're searching for. Then he says that life feels tiring. So we're now in verse 3. What does man gain from all his labor or all his work, at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the seas come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. So his conclusion is that when you're not living for the right thing, you're just going to be tired. And some of you understand that. You're working and you're working, but where does it really get you? You don't feel motivated anymore, and you just feel tired. Solomon actually talks about the cycles of nature here in this verse, and he uses that to describe what's true in our lives. He talks about the rotation of the earth. He talks about the weather patterns of examples of how oftentimes we feel, because we're just running around on this treadmill of life. We're going as fast as we can. We're sweating a lot, but we're tired and we don't feel like we're getting anywhere. An article in Men's Health magazine talked about how long-distance runners can actually run further when they're outside than they can when they're inside running on a treadmill. And a treadmill is easier on the knees, and you can control the topography when you're on a treadmill. But the article said they will run further outside. And why? It's because they feel like they're getting somewhere. They notice the trees going by, or the fields, or if it's in the city, it would be buildings. And Solomon points out that life feels really tiring when you're working hard, and then you get off and you don't really have much to show for it. The Business Week did a workplace survey to ask the number one answer to this question: how do you feel? And the number one answer was, I feel tired. And I think it's true in the workplace. It's probably true in the home as well. When you're going hard and fast and you're not really sure why you're doing it or where it's going to get you, it doesn't take long for you to start to feel just exhausted with all of that. And that's why we have so many energy drinks being sold now. People are trying to get that energy back again. But Solomon says that's a symptom of not living for the right thing. Then he says life feels unsatisfying when you don't know what you're living for. And this is a paraphrase from the Living Bible in verses 8 and 9. And no matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. History merely repeats itself. Now, he wrote all of this before the internet, before we had iPhones, before we had cable TV, because you can go home and you can spend a couple of hours surfing through the stations on the TV and then say, there's nothing on. Or you then go to your computer and you'll surf through the internet for a while. And then you'll go to your telephone and you'll use your iPhone and you'll be going through Facebook and Instagram. And then after a while you say, well, what have I done? Like, what am I doing here? You just feel as if you haven't gotten anywhere. And that's because there's a deeper thirst that can't be satisfied by what our eyes see and by what our ears hear on this earth. So Solomon says, life feels unsatisfying when you're pursuing the wrong thing. Then in verse 11, he finally says, life feels pointless. There's no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. So Solomon points out that though we're determined to leave our mark in the world, that we want people to remember us, he says that, we won't be remembered for many generations. And the truth is, we won't. Here's an experiment. Please raise your hand if you can give me all 8 names of your great-grandparents. I think it's pretty impossible. I did my family tree back in school for a history project, and I got 6 of the 8 right. There was only one great-grandmother that I actually knew. She lived to be 102, and we called her Great Grammy, so I actually got her name wrong. And then another great-grandparent, I had the wrong generation. I gave my great-great-grandfather's name. But we're just not going to remember stuff like that. So then, if you're taking notes, here's what we've learned so far. Life is meaningless. Life is unsatisfying. Life is tiring. And life is pointless. And aren't you glad you came to church this morning to just be inspired by all of that? But Solomon is just letting us know that, we think we're searching in the right direction. And it doesn't seem like this is the kind of book that we should be using, that we should be studying. But Solomon wants us to start off pessimistically, because what he's doing here is helping us to understand the need for something more in our lives. So you're not going to search for something until you know that it's actually missing from your life. And a lot of people have come to accept this pointless, unsatisfying, tiring, meaningless, whatever life as normal. And Solomon says, no, it's not. That's not normal. That's not how you were created to live. And if you're feeling that way, it's because there's something missing. And when I was in my early teens, people would offer me lobster, and I would always say, no, thank you. I'm just going to stick to the things we ate yesterday at the men's beast feast, beef and chicken and pork. But then when I was 19, I did an internship with a couple of churches in Deer Island, New Brunswick. And lobster fishing was the big thing there. And I was trying to connect with the men in the church, so I asked one of the guys, could I go out fishing lobsters with you? And he said, sure. So it was an incredible day out there on the boat, on the water. And then at the end of the day, he gave me 30 pounds of lobster. And I said, what am I going to do with this? And then somebody said, well, you boil it and eat it. So I boiled the lobster because they would go bad if you didn't. And then I tried one and I realized I really liked this. And I ate as much as I could. And then I had lobster sandwiches for the next week. It was incredible. But, sometimes we don't realize we're missing something until we actually start to have that opportunity to eat it. So Solomon says, listen, if you're feeling unsatisfied in life, and if you're kind of wondering, what's the point of it all? If you just in general feel tired, then maybe it's because you're not living for the right thing. And a search begins by realizing that something is missing. But the next part of the search is that you look for what's missing. So that night, I thought, okay, maybe I'll have better luck out there with a flashlight. And maybe that contact lens will just kind of glisten in the light. But I walked that path back and forth over and over again. And I'd find all kinds of things that looked like my contact lens. I'd pick them up, look at them. No, that's not it. And then after a while, I just said, I'm never going to find that contact. I lost all enthusiasm, and I just called it quits. And maybe you're at that point, you're thinking, I'm never going to find it. I've tried everything, and I just can't quench this thirst that I have in my life. And whenever I do try something, it always comes back again. So maybe you think that now's the time to just start accepting life the way it is. Time to call off the search. But the scriptures say that God has set eternity in our hearts. And God has made that effort so that we would have this inner desire that can't ultimately be actually satisfied by anything in this world. We try and satisfy that thirst with relationships and eventually discover that's not it. We try to do it with money and possessions, and we realize it always just seems to take a little more. The list goes on and on of things that we initially get excited about, but then discover that isn't it. So we realize something is missing at some point, And then we begin the desperate search in life to find what we're looking for. And that's what the book of Ecclesiastes is all about. It's Solomon journaling his various searches to find the missing piece in his life. And as you read through the book, you'll see that he searched in a lot of the same places that people are searching today. Nothing has really changed. So then in verse 14, he comes to his conclusion. And he says, I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, and all of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So this verse is really the key to understanding the rest of this whole book, actually. So we want to spend a few minutes looking at the key phrases in that verse. And the first one I want to draw your attention to is under the sun. And that is used 29 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. And what he's doing here, he's trying to help us understand where he's searching and where he's looking. And it's under the sun. It's in this world. So he's trying to find satisfaction through the things of this world, but it can't truly fulfill. And notice what he's done. He has removed heaven from that equation. This isn't a spiritual search that he's on, but it's a purely humanistic approach to answering the question, is there anything on this earth that can satisfy us and fulfill us? So he limits his search by looking under the sun. And the second word he uses is meaningless. And this appears 35 times in the book. And it really is the overwhelming conclusion that Solomon reaches as he searches in these different areas. As he picks up those pieces and he looks at them, no, that's not it. And he puts that back and he holds it up in the light and still that's not it. Is this it? Is this what will satisfy? Is this what I'm looking for? And then he just says, no, this is meaningless, and he throws it back. And then one other phrase I want to draw your attention to is chasing after the wind. And that's used 9 times in the book. And it really captures how he feels on this search. It captures the frustration that he experiences by looking under the sun for meaning when he's not going to find it there. So he says it's chasing after the wind. And doesn't that sound frustrating? Like grasping wind is another way to phrase it. You're grasping at something that just isn't there. And some of us understand the frustration he's speaking of, because if you're the type of person that's always losing your cell phone or your keys or your wallet, you know what it's like. You're always out there looking for those things. You know how frustrating it can be. And Solomon says that is chasing after the wind. But then he expresses his frustration in a more poetic way in verse 15. He says, what is twisted cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. And there are a couple of different pictures that come to mind here. One, when you're actually searching for purpose in life under the sun, it's like trying to untangle something that just can't be untangled. Maybe you're moving to a new house and you're opening boxes and you're putting things away. And then you open this box and it's filled with cords for everything, appliances, the IT stuff, and everything is just jumbled. And you pull those out and you try to separate them, and it seems to just become more and more tangled. Well, that is chasing after the wind. It's a frustration. And then he puts it this way: what is lacking cannot be counted. So now the picture is one of receiving a brand new puzzle for Christmas. And you carefully take the plastic off the puzzle, you put all the pieces onto the table, spread them out, and then you work on the puzzle, and you get to a point where there's one piece missing. And it's right in the middle of that picture, which is so important. And you look under the sofa, you look under the chair, you look everywhere for it, and they just forgot to put it in the puzzle. That is where we find frustration once again. So this is what Solomon is saying life is like. When you're trying to find what you're missing under the sun, you're trying to find that peace that doesn't really exist. It's not here on this earth. And he speaks of the frustration that we experience. See, all of us have this internal detector that's constantly beeping. Maybe you start a new relationship and that beeper says, this is the one, and this is the one I've been looking for. But it doesn't end up satisfying. Or maybe you pull up to an intersection and this really nice car pulls up beside you and that beeper goes off. You think you should have that car. Or maybe you go view through one of the QE2 lottery homes and you see this house and you say, I would love to have that as a home like that. But we say, go for it. Get the car, live in that house. But there'll be another lottery house. There'll be another car that looks better that we would want to live in. So really that's a picture of life. This is what I need. This is what I'm missing. And everything comes up promising. Now I was reading that we are exposed to some 6,000 to 10,000 commercial advertisements every day. And it's everywhere. It's billboards. It's on the TV. It's in the newspaper. It's everywhere online that we look. And they're all designed to make that detector go off, to say that you are really missing out on this something. But everything ends up promising us something that it really can't deliver. I just want to quickly read some quotes to you from people who really echo the words of Solomon. The actor Nicolas Cage said, I wonder if there is a hole in the soul of my generation. We've inherited the American dream, but where did it take us? It's not just about cars and wealth. Are we paralyzed by our dreams of consumption? Tom Brady, who's a retired NFL quarterback, has won 7 Super Bowl rings. And he said, why do I have all of these and still think that there is something greater out there for me? I think it's got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be what it's all cracked up to be. I think there are a lot of parts about me that I'm trying to find. So he speaks of the search. And then Eddie Murphy, the actor, said, I don't think there's anyone who feels like there isn't something missing in their life, no matter how much money you make or how many cars or houses you have or how many people you make happy. Ferdinand Marcos, once the president of the Philippines, said, I am president. I am the most powerful man in the Philippines. All I have dreamt of, I have, but I feel discontent. And then Brad Pitt, the actor, said, man, I know all these things are supposed to seem important to us, the car, the condo, our version of success. If you ask me, I say, toss it all. We've got to find something else. I'm the guy who's got everything. I'm sitting in it, and I'm telling you, that's not it. And so none of these people have ever claimed to be believers, but they understand. They're trying to find something that just isn't out there. So we hear the testimony of Solomon, and we hear the testimonies of others who've pursued these paths that we may be on. And we don't believe it because we think to ourselves, it's going to be different for us. It's going to be a fulfillment in my life when I get those things. I know that when I have these, then I'll be satisfied. But Solomon says, no, listen, that's chasing after the wind. That's what that is. So just find that search will continue. That's what you'll find. You'll just have to keep going and going. So the next morning I went outside and it was a beautiful sunny day, and I was walking from the deck over to the stairs going down to the beach, and I just thought, well, I'll look down as I walk along, and there was something that really caught my eye. It was down at the bottom of the grass. And I thought, that's probably just another little pebble or something like that. But I reached down, picked it up, and it was my contact lens. I couldn't believe it. I'd saved $120 by finding that thing. So it was a thrilling moment when that happened. And I just kind of stared at it in disbelief. After much effort, I had found what I was looking for. It was worth the search. So there's something exciting about searching for something that you'd given up thinking, I'm never going to find it. It's lost forever. And then when you do find it, it is a thrilling moment. Every week, somebody finds that in Jesus Christ here. They've given up on finding it in their lives, and they've found it in Jesus. And the book of Ecclesiastes is written inductively, in that it doesn't reach the conclusion until the very end, the last chapter of the book. So after saying, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it, or saying it's meaningless, it's meaningless, it's meaningless, then in chapter 12, verse 13, he says, this is it. So the band, you guys can come to the front now. And he says, now all this has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So his conclusion is that what's been missing under the sun wasn't there. But instead, he says, this is a paraphrase, the whole duty, the whole purpose of man is God. It's what you were created for. So you may think that the missing piece will be found if you just reach a certain level of success, or maybe you live in a certain home, or maybe you just experience this certain kind of pleasure. You may think you found it in your marriage, in your work, in your hobby, but no, you haven't. That's not it. Solomon says it's only found in God. Now, on the surface, this seems like a message for unbelievers to get your life straightened out and get on the track with God. But actually, it's for believers, because we can so easily have one foot on one path and the other foot on the other path. Like, we believe in Jesus, but we're still, trying to kind of hang on to some things in this world. We're following Jesus, but we're also trying to chase those dreams. And there's a part of us that does say, if I could experience this, if I could just achieve that, then I would be fulfilled. So here's the invitation from Solomon, is to say, you know what? I'm going to just surrender it all to Jesus. I'm going to decide that he's the only person that can truly bring fulfillment into my life. Over 1,500 years ago, this prayer was written by Augustine, and it simply went like this. He said to God, our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Would you just say that with me? Our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. So that is the missing piece. It's Jesus Christ. That's where we find that fulfillment. Because Solomon said, you won't find it under the sun, but 1 John 5 tells us where we'll find it. He who has the Son has life, and he who does not have the Son of God does not have life. So what you're looking for, what you're searching for, is found in Jesus Christ. That's where it is. And if you want to talk to someone about your relationship with Jesus and what that would be like, talk to me, talk to James. We'll be at the door on the way out. Don't leave here without making certain that you have your goal set on what is meaningful, not meaningless.